In cities across the nation, communities are being forced to recognize and deal with a growing crisis that affects our most precious asset, our children. The rise in the number of street gangs nationwide has prompted overwhelming concern and, in some cases, panic among citizens in areas where misinformation and denial have allowed the problem to fester. Street gangs prey on youth searching to fill a void in their lives, but often lead to antisocial behavior. While a life of violent crime is not the reason young people join gangs, the end result is sometimes deadly. Gangs in one form or another are not a new phenomenon in the United States. In fact, they've been in existence for hundreds of years. Modern-day street gangs, however, are constantly changing and pose new challenges for law enforcement officials in cities and towns where they have staked their claim. Today's gangs consist primarily of males, ranging in age from 12 to 30. Most, but not all of these groups are comprised of racial and ethnic minorities. Each gang has its own unique vocabulary, signs, and colors which distinguish them from other gangs or gang sets. Street gangs are often indigenous to a particular area and make their presence known with graffiti, commonly known as the newspaper or bulletin boards of gangs. Most street gangs identify with a large city gang or remain locally turf-oriented. Los Angeles and Chicago have been historically singled out as the two U.S. cities where street gangs were conceived.
Want some more, gang? All right, guys. Put your hands on my hood.
There are an estimated 800 to 1,000 gangs presently on the streets of Los Angeles, with anywhere from 120 to 220,000 members. Urban decay and the steady decline of the inner city over several decades are two factors attributed to the rise of gangs and gang violence in the Los Angeles area. While it is not the driving force behind these groups, the advent of crack cocaine in the early 80s has also played a role in the increase of violent gang crime. Experts warn that while Los Angeles and Chicago may be extreme examples of cities facing gang epidemics, the problem is not confined to these two metropolitan areas.
There are several major gangs that come from the major gang epicenters that we've got influence of all across the country. You, of course, have the Crips and the Bloods, which have been around from the LA area since the 70s, and you also have up in the Chicago area the Folk Nation and the People Nation, which have been around since the 60s. And the other thing that we have happening is we have kids that are forming hybrid gangs. I call them teenage mutant gangsters, where they have no real connection to any big street gang from any epicenter, but they're doing kind of the same dynamics without the leadership that many times keeps gang violence in check. And so every community is susceptible to that. No community is immune from this problem, and it's spreading all across the country, not only the hardcore epicenter gangs, but also the teenage mutant gangs.
After serving as coroner in Little Rock, Arkansas for 10 years, Steve Nawojczyk retired in 1994 to concentrate on researching the dynamics of street gangs. During his tenure as coroner, he witnessed firsthand the harsh realities of youth violence. Troubled by trends he noticed in the number of homicides involving young people on a local and national level, Nawojczyk conducted his own personal investigation and was alarmed by what he discovered.
I went to the streets to begin learning about why this was happening, and I was shocked to find that we had gangs. I mean, we had Crips, we had Bloods, we had the Folk Gang from Chicago and Latin Kings. We had them all in Little Rock, and I began to be very interested and came to understand very quickly that it was going to take more than just prisons and jails and more police to deal with this problem. We had to understand basically why the young people were doing it, and that's what I did. I learned, I tell people that my professors were young people. My professors were the young people that were going to jail, and the young people that were going into body bags, and their families.
As a result of his in-depth research on street gangs, Nawojczyk has become an expert on the subject. His work has been featured on several national and international television programs, most notably HBO's America Undercover series, Gang War Bangin' in Little Rock. Nawojczyk spends much of his time lecturing to various civic, political, and law enforcement groups about gang activity. His objective is twofold: educating everyone on why our children are joining these groups and demonstrating community intervention techniques.
Most of the kids that get involved in these activities, whether they come from poor inner city home or whether they come from the heights, it doesn't make any difference. Almost always, boredom is a big part of it. You have children who are seeking identity, recognition, belonging, discipline, love, respect, all of those kind of things that we get out of other activities that adults are involved in. Children are looking for the same thing. I tell people frequently that many times over the years I've found that almost all of the young people that get involved in these activities, whether they are perpetrators, whether they're victims, it doesn't make any difference, come from the 5-H Club. And if you understand the dynamics of the 5-H's, you can understand what you have to do as a community. The 5-H's are helpless, hopeless, homeless, hungry, and hugless. And if you think about it, every kid needs those things, but not every kid's getting those things.
Although there are exceptions, research has shown that street gangs appearing in neighborhoods across America are rarely as well defined as the established gangs in Los Angeles and Chicago. Instead, they are loosely organized with weak leadership and bonds of loyalty that are easily broken. If left unchecked, these bonds can strengthen and become dangerous. This can lead to disaster for smaller cities that are under the impression that gangs in their communities are simply wannabes, incapable of causing the kind of damage they have inflicted on large metropolitan areas.
I don't like to use the word wannabe. I call them gonna-bees. Because if there's not an intervention, they are going to be doing the same thing that gangs are. And a wannabe, a lot of times communities are disarmed by that word. If your leaders are saying, "Oh, we don't have gangs, we just have wannabes," well, everybody in the community says, "Well, I don't need to be involved in this solution." That's not the case, and every community is susceptible to this. One of the things that happens a lot of times is kids not only are recruited many times by gang leaders that travel up and down the freeways looking for more people to sell drugs or become involved in their activities, but sometimes kids are transferred into your community, and they might be sent from Chicago or LA or one of the epicenters of gangs to live in a small rural area to get them away from the environment that they came from. But if you don't take the gang out of the kid at the same time that you take the kid out of the gang, all you've done is transplant the gang. And that's happened.
One area that has witnessed the migration of hardcore gang members from Los Angeles, combined with the more common proliferation of homegrown turf gangs, is Shreveport, Louisiana. Located in Caddo Parish, 30 miles east of Texas, Shreveport has a population of 200,000. At first glance, this seemingly peaceful community appears far removed from the crisis being faced in Los Angeles. A closer look, however, reveals a relatively small city infested with LA-style street gangs.
I think it's generally believed that the gangs came to Shreveport. We're on the interstate. We feel that persons who resided in Shreveport right after World War II moved to California, took up residence there, and we think that some of the initial members of the Los Angeles gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, who left for reasons of their own security, the law enforcement agencies there were after them. They either had warrants for their arrest for armed robbery, murder, something like this. We feel they left there to come back to live with relatives here, and of course they brought that knowledge with them, and it was simply easy picking, so to speak, to organize a group here, and I believe that, frankly, that's how gangs started in our Shreveport area.
The majority of the gangs in Shreveport are black street gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, probably that way everywhere in the nation.
No killing, just a hand.
The influx of Crips and Bloods into the area has been so pervasive and their influence so strong that the city of Shreveport is commonly referred to as Little L.A.
Y'all want to see some more signs?
Once law enforcement officials in Shreveport identified the problem, they began gathering intelligence information on the various gangs and their members. This meant researching and investigating all aspects of modern-day gang culture, beginning with graffiti.
See what we got here. What we do with the graffiti, we kind of try to keep track of graffiti we see throughout the city. And sometimes looking at the graffiti, you can tell some of the conflicts are going on between the gangs. For instance, in a particular Blood neighborhood, you may go in and you may see Blood gang graffiti that has been all marked out with blue spray paint. And then, say, Rolling 60s gang graffiti is painted over the top of that. That can be a challenge to the Bloods. I've been in your neighborhood. I've violated your territory. Now, what you going to do about it?
Sergeant Steve Floyd is responsible for tracking gangs and their activities in Shreveport. The majority of his investigative efforts center around the Crips and the Bloods and the numerous groups that align themselves with these two Los Angeles-based gangs.
We use the term gangs, but the gang itself is like the Crips gang. Under that gang of Crips, there are what's called sets. The sets, for instance, is like the Rolling 60s, the Five Deuce Hoovers. Those are different sets that all come under the Crip umbrella. And it's the same thing with the Bloods. Over on the left-hand side here, you got a number 1, and you got the word slob, which has a line through it. And then right under that, you have killa. That is a threat or a snide remark against the Blood gangs. The Crips will call the Bloods slobs as a slang. A Crip member will never say the full word Blood. So they always say slobs for whenever they refer to Blood. So they're just saying number 1 slob killer, which means number 1 Blood killer.
Once gangs became entrenched in the Shreveport area, it was not long before their involvement in criminal activity progressed beyond graffiti on public buildings. Shreveport's gangs began to play a major role in local drug trafficking and as a result grew increasingly violent.
I need a dime rock, man. Right here, bro. Let me see, bro. Y'all need to get up here now. Get up here now. Get up here now. That son of a bitch has knocked the shit out of me.
The majority of our gang activity revolves around narcotics, either the desire for or some result of being on. Naturally, narcotics equals money, and money equals power, and you've got to have money and power in order to exist as a gang member. And so, really, narcotics is probably the umbrella, I guess you would say. Now, under the umbrella of narcotics, you have your carjackings, you have your homicides, your drive-by shootings. We're even seeing a lot of home intrusion type robberies where the gang members will go in and torture known distributors of some sort of narcotic and torture them and try to find out where the stash is, whether it be money or the drugs. So we're seeing more and more things like that.
Like most street gangs, the sets in Shreveport posed more of a physical threat to one another than to law-abiding citizens. But their reign of terror and intimidation had a devastating impact on the community. Gang-related crime left many innocent residents fearing for their safety and, in some areas, their lives. The rash of gang violence in downtown Shreveport forced police to institute a zero-tolerance approach to fighting street gangs.
Mainly the police department in Shreveport is trying to take a proactive, aggressive stance against gangs, and I would imagine that any police department would say that. We're doing it in the way that we have formed I won't call them a gang unit, but really they operate mainly on gangs. Our directed patrol unit, that's uniformed police officers, 11 officers that work together in targeted areas. Our street level interdiction unit, which is also known as the Jump Out Boys, they're very, very effective.
I don't know why they're so scared of the police.
Y'all scared of they call you jump out me.
Yeah, we are jump out boys, but they ain't got no reason to be scared of us. Any of y'all gang members? Huh? How come you wearing gang colors? On this end of town, what you wearing is considered gang colors. The only people that wear this black and white besides the police is gang members. Y'all all dress alike for a reason?
Nicknamed the Jump Out Boys by local gangbangers, the street-level interdiction unit is responsible for suppressing neighborhood drug dealing and any criminal activity on the streets, whether it's gang or non-gang related.
You ever been arrested before? What was you arrested for? But I run to the front and he never come out. I was gonna cut him off.
Yeah, I'm waiting on them.
Lay down on the front car. Keep your hands spread out.
This right here.
Don't you move, you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's clear. Got rock right here. Got 2 rocks right there. We got rock in the building right there, cocaine. Go ahead and put your hand behind your back, buddy.
Bag it.
You know what? I got a good mind to put you in jail for telling them that the police was coming. I seen you when you done it. I seen you when you done it. You told them the police was coming.
Let me I went to walk home.
I was walking through there, and then when I come through, y'all was driving.
Oh, hush. I know exactly what you done. I seen it. Come over here and let me show you something.
Yep. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. Where was that at?
I don't know what it was.
This ain't nothing but a crack house. That's all it is. Who had the weapon?
She did. She did.
She thinks it's funny, huh?
I guess. She got
Going the hell out of this.
Oh, I don't think it's funny, but get that.
See his shirt, Cooper Road, all blue. These is Crips. What's with the all the blue y'all are wearing? Are y'all Crips? You claim a set? If you do, be proud.
I know if I did, I would.
I rode to Cedar Grove. Hey, they proud over there. What you gonna be when you get old enough to really think about a career as far as
OG.
an OG?
Yeah.
What's OG stand for? Original gangster?
Yeah.
You gonna be an OG all your life?
Yeah, when I get old, yeah, get a few more years up under my belt.
You plan on having any children, or do you already?
One.
You got one now? You want him to be an OG?
Yeah, I want him to be whatever, you know. I want to be here.
You don't worry about getting shot out here?
I done been shot.
You done been shot?
Yeah, got 9 fingers.
Where at?
Right here in the hand.
Let me see. Yeah, you got a finger missing. What hit you there?
357.
357?
Once they are arrested, unsentenced gang members are locked down in the Caddo Parish Correctional Facility.
We have a new generation jail, and the concept of the new generation jail is that you live in that pod peacefully with the other inmates, and you follow the rules. They're let out of their cell into the day area at 6 in the morning, and they don't really go back in except for checks until 10 at night, and then they're locked down at night. Certain amount of freedom there, but they must follow the rules, and they're taught to follow those rules. They develop that discipline.
Inside the facility, gang members are counseled on a variety of issues from drug and alcohol abuse to nonviolent conflict resolution. It's all part of an effort to keep them from returning to the streets with the same gang mentality that resulted in their arrest.
I seen a unity in it, you know, how everybody came together, everybody was like brothers in it, you know, and we was all trying to come up with the most purpose, the one purpose that we needed, and that was for everybody, you know, to stick together. Because without unity these days, you can't really do nothing. And then, you know, a bunch of real dudes, once you get together with some people that's real like you, then y'all just be bonded and you stay together, because it's hard to find real people these days.
Like, if I got shot at, you know, I had got into it with somebody, me and somebody had got into it or something like that, you know, and it was like they'll try to catch you slipping, you know, like if they think you ain't, you know what I'm saying, don't think they gonna come back and try to get you, that's when they gonna try to get you, you know.
You know, it ain't, you know, I done built a big reputation. Like I said, I'm in for armed robbery. Really, you know what I'm saying? See, it's like this here. You know, I built a bad name for myself. You know, I done laid up down and did all this here and went coming back for jail all my life. You know, since I've been coming back and forth since I got in this, and it gained a bad name for myself. Not anything jump off, my name come up in it, I'm automatically a suspect. They gonna snatch me out the street until I prove myself innocent.
They homies in the gang might be giving them more love than their mom and daddy be giving them at home, you know.
It's like a family because, you know, you got OGs that you can look up to, that you talk to. You know, they give you the game about certain things. You got certain things, you know, like when you was young at the time, about 9 years ago, I was about 19, 18, 17. So, you know, it's certain things that you can't just really go to your mother, your father and stuff and talk about. So, you know, you got big homeboys that you can go to and you can kick it with. They're going to give you some real advice and be real with you. They can help kind of parent you, you know what I'm saying? Then you can confide in them. There you go.
When you be in a gang, it's like you being grown. It's like you skipping your childhood, just straight come, you know what I'm saying, being an adult. You know, I tell them, you know what I'm saying, stay at home, you know what I'm saying, go to school, because I wish I would have went to school and, you know, graduated or not, you know what I'm saying, got an education, you know, because I'm not a dumb person, you know. But, you know, I would tell them, you know, stay at home, be a kid, you know what I'm saying. You can still have friends that's in gangs, you know what I'm saying, but you don't have to do what they do, you know what I'm saying. But, you know, for as you know what I'm saying, being in a gang, I tell them don't be in a gang, you know what I'm saying. Be your own person, do your own thing, you know, because that's what I should have did.
Shreveport law enforcement officials agree that while their persistent efforts to eradicate gangs are making headway, it'll take more than just police work in jails to solve the problem.
You got to be a responsible parent to begin with. Then in the neighborhoods, if you live in a neighborhood where you're beginning to have some problems, then you have a responsibility to band together as a neighborhood and do something about your problems.
Roosevelt Seabury is one Shreveport resident who has answered law enforcement's call to action. As a member of the Shreveport Police Department's Neighborhood Assistance Team, he is directly involved in helping young people get out of gangs and deterring children from joining them.
There are many reasons why youth get involved with gangs, but one of the main things is that they want to belong. They feel a need to belong. They have a need to be appreciated. They have a need to be loved. They have a need for recognition. And so there are a number of organizations that are there for them to meet those needs, such as the schools and recreation, parks and recreation, then Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. There are a number of things that can help them to get the needs fulfilled. The problem is that gangs give them a real sense of belonging because the people who are involved in it depend upon one another. And it's important for us to understand that we've got to be just as committed in the area of positive things as the gang members are in the negative.
Having been raised in the housing projects of New Orleans, Seabury identifies with the struggles faced by Shreveport gang members, forced to grow up amidst abject poverty and illicit drugs. His commitment to combating what he considers a dead-end way of life has only been strengthened by tragedies experienced in his own life.
In the city of New Orleans, I had my nephew, they called him Lil Donald, who was shot down in the Cooper Projects, shot 14 times. And I understand that the drugs and the gangs are the main reasons behind this boy losing his life at a very, very young age. I'm really concerned about too many of our children that are dying in the street, and I'm very concerned that society have to do something that's going to impact the lives of the kids to keep them from joining this particular organization rather than joining an organization that's going to prosper them and cause them to live eternally or live longer upon this land.
Seabury and the Neighborhood Assistance Team ardently support prevention programs like those administered by the Lighthouse. Located in Ledbetter Heights, an area of Shreveport nicknamed the Bottom by gang members, the Lighthouse offers programs that promote education and instill hope.
Programs like these are vitally important in these times. We have so many factors out in the streets that will pull at children. We have so many temptations. We also have so many parts of our social strata that have come under siege. We have families that are under siege. We have school systems that are under siege. We have a political system that is under siege. We need to have everything positive that we can offer young people to get them involved in so that they feel good about themselves in the future. The things that young people can leave this experience is knowing that they're cared for, knowing that they can achieve, knowing that schoolwork is something that's vitally important, and it gives them what we call a future time perspective, a sense of themselves at a different point in time doing something wonderful in their lives.
I have experienced those kind of situations where I've had, choices to be in a gang, and I chose not to. Well, I've thought about it, being in a gang, because my family, But the Lighthouse and Mr. Anderson, he talks to me all the time. He's just like my second father. And we talk a lot, and he tells me such and such that happens, and I listen to him just like he's my dad, and we learn. And nobody's up here in the gang, we're just like sisters and brothers up here. So, yeah, I had my share of experiences, but for this gang-wise, it's not me. It's not me.
Law enforcement, along with residents of Shreveport, have made considerable strides in addressing the issue of gangs and attacking them at their roots, but they are not claiming victory. There is still concern that existing gangs could become as powerful and as menacing as a group known as the Bottom Boys, once considered the most notorious gang in Shreveport.
Well, about 2 years ago in this whole neighborhood right here, from about this street all the way about 4 blocks this way, we had a black criminal street gang in this neighborhood. They were called the Bottoms Boys. They weren't affiliated with the Crips or the Blood, those types of criminal street gangs. They were what they called an independent gang. Their gang absolutely controlled this neighborhood. Any activity that went on, they controlled it. Any business that went on, they controlled it. They controlled the citizens. They controlled every little thing that happened in this neighborhood. They had it clamped down tight.
Just blocks from the Lighthouse, the Bottom Boys commandeered an entire street and made it their own. Fannin Street was the site of excessive drug trafficking and gang violence, including several homicides. Through fear and intimidation, the Bottom Boys proved just how dangerous and powerful the bonds of street gangs can be. This amateur video was shot by their own members. It would later come back to haunt them. In 1994, a violent criminal task force was organized to take down the Bottom Boys. Made up of agents from the FBI, ATF, DEA, and the U.S. Marshal's Office, the task force worked directly with the Shreveport Police and Caddo Parish Sheriff's Office in an effort to target the gang's leaders and most violent offenders. The home videos shot by the Bottom Boys were seized during the investigation and later used by the U.S. Attorney's Office in their prosecution of this murderous gang.
State law officers had more than 30 suspected drug dealers targeted during last week's raid on the Bottoms Boys.
9 gang members were sentenced for a series of criminal activities in the Ledbetter Heights area for 2 years. The crimes included drug trafficking and murder. U.S. District Judge Don Walter showed little leniency, imposing sentences ranging from 10 to 35 years maximum security prison. City, parish, and state law enforcement officers believe today's sentencings send a warning to other drug trafficking gangs. They will be brought to justice. For now, they're content. There's one less gang ruling the streets of Shreveport.
We're not doing as much as I'd like to see us do. And that's simply because of a lack of resources. To fight gangs successfully, you've got to attack some real problems that all of society have to deal with together. Law enforcement alone can't do it.
We got this for the police. We got this for the police.
Is you gonna use it though?
Who gonna use it?
Is you gonna use it?
Why won't you? Why won't you?
Say man, don't point that shit toward me, boy.
Just over 300 miles southeast of Shreveport, law enforcement officials in Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, are prepared to challenge street gangs that threaten their communities. Located on the border of Orleans Parish, this predominantly suburban area encompasses 6 municipalities with a combined population of over 448,000. Like most law enforcement agencies in suburbia, police in Jefferson were surprised to learn that they had a gang problem.
I remember it was like yesterday. Chief Clavery and I were in a restaurant, a local restaurant. We had our families with us. His son and his girlfriend were talking about some incidents that had occurred in the neighborhood. And they mentioned that there had been some ride-by shootings.
All of a sudden, my son starts telling me, and Chief Rodriguez, about an incident that happened a couple of days prior to that where a group of kids passed by a house on David Drive and shot the house up.
And I was listening, and of course I was aware that we had ride-by shootings. But I guess I really didn't key on the fact that we had gang members out there, youngsters in the neighborhoods that would actually ride by and shoot into people's homes.
And Richard Rodriguez and I are looking at one another and saying, if this is happening in Jefferson Parish, we got to put a stop to this. We're not going to allow this to happen in Jefferson Parish.
The next week I spoke with the sheriff, and we talked about the idea of maybe assigning one officer to work on gang investigations. At that time, we had the intelligence division was keeping track of gangs. They were having monthly meetings. There was quite a bit of an exchange of information concerning gangs, but apparently the violence involved in gangs had picked up.
While the degree of violence in Jefferson was not nearly as serious as situations faced in Los Angeles and Shreveport, gangs were an area of great concern for the sheriff's office and one they felt needed to be addressed immediately.
There is a problem. We recognize it. It's not going to go away by pretending it doesn't exist. We want to talk about it. We want to get it out in the open. We want to expose all the kids to the dangers of becoming a gang member. We want to educate the parents the fact that the way the kids conduct themselves, the distinctive clothing they wear and all, that they are potentially gang members and that they are on the way to get in trouble.
Lieutenant Curtis Snow was the first officer in Jefferson Parish assigned to investigate gangs and their activities full-time. This involved identifying and tracking different gangs and sets already in existence.
Well, right now we find that there's approximately 35 different gangs operating in Jefferson Parish, and we have a mixture. We have Crips and we have Bloods, Latin Kings, and we have groups that call themselves gangs or consider themselves gangs that don't even affiliate themselves with those nationally known names such as Crips, Bloods, and Latin Kings.
What began as a temporary assignment for Lieutenant Snow quickly became a permanent one. Although the problem was in its infancy, there was no denying that street gangs were gaining a foothold in the residential neighborhoods of Jefferson Parish.
How many of y'all claiming in the Piru now? How many of y'all think y'all got?
About
30? Y'all down to 30?
Like a moose. Cut them all out.
So they chilling, you chilling, everybody's chilling tonight. Y'all got no beefs with the Kings right now?
Not. I mean, I think they have a few beefs with a few of us, but not me and... I mean, if it came down to it, I would have to get...
How many different sets of the Bloods are we looking at now over in the East Bank?
Maybe. On the East Bank, probably about 3.
Being what? Piru and who else?
We got, I think, 31st and Lincoln Manor.
You know what would do real good, huh? Take the colors off. No disrespect, but that'd do you real good also. To stop this and just take the colors off, you know?
I tell you why, truthfully, there's no point in taking them off, because I still label it as one. Maybe not to y'all no more, but other gangs, I still be labeled as one.
Suburbia is the perfect place for gangs to start up, because that's where you have large concentrations of children, and usually 8, 9, 10, there's a fascination, there's an interest in gangs, and from 11 on up, they develop that interest, and that's where your neighborhood gang starts. There's 5 classifications of gangs, certainly neighborhood gangs being one of them, and school gangs being another one. Our gangs in Jefferson Parish are usually twofold. Their neighborhood, they go into the schools, and then vice versa.
In addition to working with the Special and Criminal Investigations Divisions on intervening in gang conflicts and suppressing gang-related crime, Snow was assigned the task of educating young people and adults on the dangerous bonds that exist among street gangs.
Lieutenant Snow, I'm with the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office. I'm the commander of the street gang section. There's no right or wrong here, okay? We're here to learn. I want a show of hands who knows a gang member or, well, okay. That's for the adults who are in the room. That is a typical response.
Over the past 3 years, Snow has lectured to hundreds of school and civic groups in Jefferson Parish and New Orleans.
Now, we talked about jump outs. We got the jump in, the initiation of it. 4 or 5 guys beat you up. Then after that, sometimes you have to go commit a felony, a shooting, robbery. More often than not, it's just steal a car. It is not violence. It's just something like steal a car, and usually directed towards a rival gang. In some gangs, it's burning a car, okay? That is not to show heart. That is not to show loyalty to the gang. And that is what the gang members will tell you, that you've got to show heart. You got to be brave. You got to show you're down with the gang. You have to show all these things, your loyalty, loyalty, loyalty. They drill it into you. That's not what it's about. Listen to somebody who's been working the opposite end of it for 4 years now. It is not about loyalty. It is about getting something over your head so that you won't snitch, rat, whatever word you want to call it. So you won't snitch on them if they get caught on something. That's all that's for. They hold it over your head. Remember you shot that guy. Remember you stole that car. You tell on us, we telling on you. There's no loyalty in the gangs, none whatsoever. It is every man or every woman for themselves.
Although his lectures have created awareness of the hazards associated with gangs, not everybody's getting the message. Some are lured by the sense of belonging and self-esteem they acquire as gang members, while others feel they have no choice regardless of how it impacts their family.
See, like, they got a neighborhood that all Bloods go into, and they got a group of neighborhood of all Crips, and they got a group of neighborhood of all Latin Kings. You just gotta know what neighborhood to put you into and everything. Like, if you grow up in a Latin King neighborhood, you're gonna eventually become a Latin King. If you grow up in a Blood neighborhood, you're eventually gonna be a Blood. If you're gonna grow up in a Crip neighborhood, you'll be a Crip.
Start wondering, start paying a little more attention to what's going on, and you start getting real angry. Start getting violent, you know, start breaking things, and then we start hearing stuff get missing, you know, and then that idea he was on doing some kind of dope and all because he was acting real strange. It's just, you know, so with him we figured it had to be, you know, because this wasn't him, and you know, this wasn't within a 4-month period. He went from being a good kid with doing good in school to just being 100% different.
They got things like a Crip set will say, yeah, let's go on a BK ride, and a Blood set will say, let's go on a CK ride, and that means going looking for Bloods for Crips. And you go, and it's like you get all hyped up and everything, and you're like, your adrenaline starts pumping real quick and everything. It's like, it's fun.
Thanksgiving of '95, we had around that time we had 3 killings involving gangs. One of them particular incident was the tunnel incident that happened on the West Bank. So, you know, gang activity had, gang violence had increased. You know, we were having incidents, and then all of a sudden we actually had murders, and then that really wakes you up to say, hey, you know, what's happening?
They were shot in a car driving through the Harvey Tunnel. All of the victims were members or associates of the 5.9 Bloods, a gang becoming well known for its role in violence on the West Bank. Late yesterday, deputies arrested 23-year-old Anthony Guzman and 22-year-old Mervyn Williams, 2 members of a rival Harvey gang called the Rolling 60s Crips. Both are suspected triggermen that fired on the red Mitsubishi Thursday morning, killing 2 teens and injuring 4 others.
We was waiting outside the door. The man came and told us to wait
And then he walked inside the emergency room. We was wait there for like 1-2 minutes. He came out and said he was sorry, but she died. And I just lost it. You know, I didn't know what happened. Because Mara was just a healthy girl. She never had no major illness. She never was sick. She gets a cold, but that's it. But for somebody to come and tell you that your daughter was gone, I felt like everything was in me fell out.
I figured that she was hanging around with the wrong crowd because she was always coming in 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And then as soon as she woke up, she was always gone again. You know, and everything she wore was always red. Yeah. But until after what happened, we had to go clean up her room. I found some pictures of some of her friends that were also gang members. None of them you could really see because they all had bandanas, red bandanas across their face or something like that. And I guess she had the word 5.9 bloods written on parts of her school notebooks.
For any parents that their children are involved in gangs, they need to try and find them and sit them down and tell them that they are not bad people. They just show them that they still love them.
The 1995 Thanksgiving Day shooting spree in the Harvey Tunnel was the culmination of an outbreak of gang-related killings in Jefferson Parish. 7 teenagers were killed over a period of 3 months, prompting the sheriff's office to step up their aggressive attack on gang violence.
Look this way. Open your mouth. Open your tongue. Where you lived at before Algiers?
Morero.
Where at Morero?
Across the creek in a bag of that.
211 soldier, huh?
I was, but
you was a 211 soldier?
Yeah. First name? Yeah. Spell, please.
Listen, Antoine, listen to me. Listen to me. Talk with your mouth, not with your hands. If you take your hands off the car again, I'm going to take it as an aggressive motion, okay?
Since 1995, the Street Crimes Unit has played an important role in combating gang-related crime. Following the rash of violent murders in Jefferson Parish, the unit was deployed in communities known for gang activity. Similar to the Jump Out Boys in Shreveport, Street Crimes is designed to extinguish illegal activity in volatile neighborhoods.
How old were you when you got in the gang? You was 15 years old. How you got in? You had to be jumped in or what? Something to do, huh?
Through assertive police efforts on the streets, gang violence by groups such as the 5.9 Bloods and the Rolling 60s Crips was kept to a minimum. In 1996, however, Asian gangs in Jefferson Parish progressed beyond theft, presenting a new challenge for law enforcement officials in Jefferson Parish.
The thing now is that, for many cases, the Vietnamese gangs figure that if they victimize a Vietnamese family, they won't be turned in. They have this close-knit thing. They don't want to say that Vietnamese people are bad. They don't want to give that image. They don't want to turn Vietnamese in. So they get by with it, and it causes that not to dissipate, but it just causes the criminal activity to increase when the victims say, well, we'll just forget about it because these are Vietnamese boys and we don't want to get them in trouble.
2 separate shootings involving Asian gangs, including one in a public shopping mall, left 2 gang members injured.
The Asian gangs are a lot more organized than the hybrid gangs that we have, the Bloods, Crips, and Latin Kings.
What can you tell us about the organization? Do they have a head, or do they have somebody who... Well,
the organization goes into the fact that they're more closely knitted. It's a lot harder to work their investigations. They keep it among them. Any information they have is usually kept amongst themselves.
Concerned that gang violence was endangering innocent residents of Jefferson Parish, the sheriff's office created the first gang enforcement section in the state of Louisiana. Commanded by Lieutenant Snow, The section is comprised of 5 full-time officers whose main focus is dealing with street gangs.
The gang enforcement unit on a daily basis faces 4 major challenges with street gangs, and that's intervention, prevention, suppression, and intelligence.
In order to better understand the mentality that leads to violent incidents such as the Harvey Tunnel killings or shootings in shopping malls, Lieutenant Snow and the members of the section continue to educate themselves on all aspects of gang culture. This often means building a rapport with members.
When was the first act of violence that you got involved with? What was that first act of violence you got involved with the gang?
Shooting a 14-year-old.
Was that in California or here?
California.
What, can you tell just a few little things? I don't want you to give any names or anything, but you know, basically what happened?
It was a drive-by shooting at a party. It was like part of my initiation to get in, other than being jumped in.
Okay, well, the jump in, it was a normal jump in. Yep. A bunch of the guys had to beat you up.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part of it was you had to go do a drive-by?
Yep, so I got heart.
Los Angeles is renowned.
Yeah.
It's famous for gangs and gang members and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But then we come to Jefferson Parish. I mean, that's kind of like the last place in the world, I would imagine, gangbangers. But here we are.
They got
here we
them.
are talking.
They got them.
What are the gangs like in this area?
To me, a lot of them are fake. A lot of them are wannabes, trying to be, but they ain't. You know, like them little kids out of Harvey, they call themselves 211 soldiers. You know, they go ride around and, you know, terrorize some little 14-year-olds or something. When they come across a person like myself who ain't gonna play with they, you know, because they punks, they gonna call the police on me, you know what I'm saying? And that's why they phony. Because see, in California, if you're in a gang, somebody comes does something to you, you go back and you do something to them. You don't go calling the police, because, you know, that's not being a gangster, that's being a coward, straight up coward, you know what I'm saying? Your own gang member will kill your ass if you, you know, you call the police on somebody. You know what I'm saying? You gotta handle your business. If you wanna be about the gang, you gotta be about it in all aspects of it, you know what I'm saying? So.
When you came here, were the Latin Kings here when you moved here?
No, they were not here. Latin Kings were not here at all.
Well, how did that start? Because you were one of the guys who started the Latin Kings in Metairie, huh?
I was the one who started from Kenner, and then I started in Metairie, and I started all the way to New Orleans. So I created Latin Kings all the way from Kenner to New Orleans.
And how did that come about? I mean, how did you do that?
How did I do that? Basically, I talked to a bunch of Hispanic guys, and I said, look, let's get together and let's start up a gang, and let's take out whatever gang is in our way. And they said, fine. And then they said then after we got all these guys together, we said, let's nominate a leader. And they nominated me. And so I was the leader of Latin Kings.
Is that when you got your 5 dots?
No, I did that later on down the line after I started getting my respect, and I had put LK1 for leader. First I had LK, then when they recognized me as leader, I put the 1 on my hand. And then later on the dots, I just put that on for, you know, to lay up there and show I'm representing my set, my gang. The activities that we were involved in was basically stealing cars, robbing people, you know, having women, chasing women, fighting, buying guns, and, you know, a variety of things.
And your street name, most gang members have street names, right? And your street name's Trigger T.
Trigger T.
How did that come about?
I was just a trigger happy fool, you know. Not many people want to throw hands with me. Not many people at all.
Well, what does that mean, throwing hands? Some people aren't going to understand.
Okay, fight. Nobody, you know what I'm saying? If you're 5 or 6, you might want to fight. But if you by yourself, you're going to think twice about it. You know what I'm saying? Because my size or whatnot, you know, I can knock fools out like that. I can bust your face open, whatever, so they ain't going to fight. And they're going to pull a gun on me. They're going to stunt. And so I'm just going to straight bust them. I'm going to shoot them.
But you're a big man.
Yeah.
You're not a small man. You're a good-sized man.
Yeah.
Why the guns?
Because everybody else got them. I had so many guns put on me so many times. I've been shot at so many times. I'm just not going to be the victim. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to be a victim.
You're a changed man today. I'm going to be the first one to say that. This is not the same guy I knew 4 years ago. You're a completely different person. What happened in jail?
Well, you know, going to jail, I realized, okay, I was, you know, not to get off the story or anything, I was writing a girl, you know, two females, and as a matter of fact, and me and her, one of them broke up, and she told me that I couldn't even write a complete sentence. So that really hurt me. It was the truth, but I realized I needed education, so I started studying and so forth. I laid back in the cell a lot of times, and I seen that she was right. Also, I've noticed that we're fighting for nothing. For what? A name? I mean,
I just sat back and said, man, I'm in here in jail. Nobody's writing me. Nobody's sending me money. I mean, where's my so-called homeboys, my brother Nat Kings? I mean, where are they at? I mean, where are they at now? I mean, where's my money? Where's my girl? Nothing.
What would you say to the adults in Jefferson Parish?
Keep it out on your kids, you know. Have some control of them. Don't let your kids walk on you. You know, a lot of these kids, they get flip them out and they raise their hands to their parents nowadays. If it gets to that point, you're going to have to call somebody to come get your children, you know, because you ain't going to be able to handle them. One day your child might pull a gun on you behind that stupid stuff.
What would you say to the children out here?
Grow up, grow up, you know.
And what about joining gangs and everything?
Is it worth it?
Another important aspect of gang enforcement involves intervention and prevention initiatives in area schools.
Primarily, we wanted to take our schools back. We were really concerned with the kids not feeling safe, the good kids actually not feeling safe going to school. And so that was a priority of ours.
Programs like Police on Campus place uniformed officers in high schools throughout Jefferson Parish. Police on Campus work directly with administrators from the public school system to eliminate the presence of gangs on school grounds.
Principal and myself and the staff are going after the gang issue as far as like if they have any type of rags, what we call the rags, whether they wear red, blue, or any of their colors, we go ahead and we make them remove the rag. If we have any gang literature, they might buy some suspension days out of it or detention.
Officers assigned to the Police on Campus program build relationships with students to gain their confidence and trust.
We got a phone number on John. We can call John and talk to him. All right, let me talk to Lieutenant Snow first.
All right.
I'll find out. I can see what's going on.
Why are you being nosy? Did you mean like the supreme favorite?
Yeah, that's what. I know, I'm going to try to call you that. If you don't have that kid's confidence, any type of rapport with the kids that they know that you're not just some basic guy that's going to, you know, yell at them or something like that. If you don't have a rapport, they're never going to come talk to you. No matter what, any time of the day they want to talk, you can't shut them down because it might be something important. They might be depressed. They might want to just talk to you about their boyfriend, girlfriend situation. It's numerous things I think helps with the confidence that they know I'm not going to go run back and tell the whole school system about their problems.
Gang resistance education and training, commonly referred to as GREAT, is a national program being taught in Jefferson Parish elementary and middle schools. Started by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the GREAT program is designed to help children set goals, resist pressures, and resolve conflicts without violence. Through GREAT, students are taught the ramifications of gang and youth violence.
By raising your hand, what are the 4 main drugs commonly used and or distributed by gangs? Bruno, give me one. Marijuana. Marijuana is one. Woo-woo.
Cocaine, crack.
Crack cocaine. Give me another one. Yeah. Alcohol. Derek. Inhalants. Good. I have been in school. You just ain't been paying no attention.
No, you haven't. I've been.
You called my mom and you lied on me.
I did not lie. You have not.
You just don't like me.
No, you.
I've been sitting right here the whole time.
No, you've been skipping school for 3 days.
If you get your nose out of that newspaper you always reading behind your desk, you'd know.
I teach this class every day. Don't give me that attitude.
Look, I'll show you attitude.
Listen, young man.
We're trying to give them, give our students some alternatives to gang life. The main thing is gangs are so pervasive right now in the community. It's almost a way of life for some segments of the population. This program will allow the kids to see that there are alternatives. There's hope that they can stand on their own 2 feet without worrying about going to the violent lifestyle of a gang. Also, the kids are used to hearing the hype and the glorification of the gangs. We try to tell them the reality and give them the choice. Given a choice, they don't want to ruin their lives either. They know the score and they want to do what's best for their future.
Upon completing the GREAT program successfully, students participate in graduation ceremonies honoring their achievements.
some of the greatest challenges, taking a child that has been labeled as a problem child or behavior problem and trying to get through to them. And we've had a lot of success with that. There's been several examples in the different schools I've taught where these kids have just shown through. They've done phenomenal. At the beginning, you'd think that they were, you know, really out for a bad lot in life, and by the end of the program, you can really see a marked improvement.
In the next decade, the number of 15 to 17-year-olds is expected to dramatically increase. Youth crime statistics show this segment of the population is currently the most prone to be involved in criminal activity. Considering the changing and increasingly violent nature of youth crime, the issue has become a top priority among law enforcement agents throughout the United States. To fight the battle against street gangs, it will take a comprehensive effort involving governmental institutions and organizations from the public and private sector. To win the war, everyone agrees where the campaign must begin.
Some of the things that are missing today in the homes that are causing kids to join gangs is that there is a lack of love, a lack of bonding, a lack of nurturing, a lack of modeling. You know, they don't get a chance to see what a family is like. Fathers are missing in many of our homes where children are turning to gangs as a model for them. And I think we've got to do some things that's going to cause them to feel safe. We have to do some things that's going to cause them to feel like they are important, some things that are going to cause them to feel like they belong.
The family's broken up, it's disintegrated. It doesn't exist for so many of these youth. So that institution is not there.
Everybody have to surround that child to say to the gang members, this is one kid who is loved. This is one kid who we're not going to lose. This is one kid who you're not going to destroy.
I'm not that old and not divorced from these young people whereby I don't understand their reasoning for getting in the gang. What happened is they get from each other, from the gang members, that what they're not getting at home. If it's attention or love or respect or whatever they're getting, they have found a substitute from their family. So what they've done was they have gotten together and formed their own family.
It's like cancer. If you don't treat the root causes of the problem, you can't just take pain pills and hope that it'll go away. You have to address the root problems. And any child that's doing any antisocial activity needs to be dealt with. You need to understand why it's happening.
We all hear the phrase, the children are our future. While the African poet says, they're not our future, the children are today, that we need to pay attention to them today. And I believe that very strongly also. We can't wait until tomorrow. We need to start working with our kids today.
America's street gangs have become a pervasive problem, impacting and in some cases devastating communities and their children. The rise in the number of gangs nationwide has prompted overwhelming concern among residents seeking answers to a complex crisis. Law enforcement officials and community groups have attempted to tackle the situation with a variety of prevention, intervention, and suppression techniques. Those techniques are designed to deter young people from choosing a lifestyle that, more often than not, leads to negative behavior. I'm Bob Pavlovich, and in the next hour, we'll talk to a panel of experts who will discuss why kids join gangs, try to dispel some common myths about these much often misunderstood groups, and most importantly, provide us with the information on how we can break the dangerous bonds that lead to gangs in our communities. Welcome to Dangerous Bonds, a forum on gangs. I'm Bob Pavlovich, and in the next hour, as I told you, we're going to tackle some issues and learn some things about gangs. Our first panelist that will talk with us tonight is Steve Nawojczyk. Steve, you may recognize from the gang war, Banging in Little Rock, that you may have seen on HBO a couple of years ago. He's a former Little Rock coroner and is with us tonight. Steve, thanks for joining us.
You bet. Happy to be here.
Steve, earlier today you spoke to a group of high school students. And I have to say I was surprised by the reaction of some of those students. How did you get involved in where you are today, going around the country and, as you said, being a reluctant spokesperson and national expert on gangs? How did you get to that point?
When I was the coroner in Little Rock, I took office in 1983, and we had 38 homicides that year, which statistically for the size of our county was about right. 10 years later, in 1993, that number had jumped to 111, which kind of mirrored what had happened all across the nation. The homicide rate for people under the age of 17 has gone up by 165% in the last 10 years alone, and the same thing happened in Little Rock. In the late 80s, I was traveling around the country going to various homicide schools, and I noticed that at these schools we were going to, they were teaching little segments about juvenile violence and about gang violence. And as I would go to those, I would come back to Little Rock and I would notice some of those dynamics beginning to happen in Little Rock. When our homicide rate really started escalating in the late 80s and early 90s, we got in Little Rock in 1992, our homicide rate was as great per capita as New York City and Los Angeles. And I had started in the late 80s trying to find out why so many kids were doing this, why so many young people decided to put themselves in danger, and went out into the streets and began learning about it. Spent most of my time in the streets talking to young people. And during the course of that, I found out, I really kind of violated one of the rules of a good death investigator, is you don't get personal with your case. But I had to get personal with them because I had known these kids on the street. I'd known more about them than just their name. I'd learned about their families, about where they came from, why they were doing what they were doing. And then, of course, as those children got a little bit older and the violence got a little bit worse, I had to deal with them in my professional capacity. And that forced me into what I call early retirement. I can't draw a paycheck for 20 more years, but I retired basically because I burned out. And I felt like that everything you do in the investigation of death is done to benefit the living. And I had the ability, I felt, to grasp what they were saying and put it into a lingo that people of our generation could understand. And as I was doing that in the beginning, I didn't want to really speak to children much in a school environment, and many schools didn't want me to come because they said, we don't want you to come and teach our kids about gangs. The problem with that is they were the ones, the kids were the ones that were teaching me. They already knew about it. The schools were denying the existence, that it was happening. So I left my job at the end of '94, and since then I've been traveling around the country talking to any kind of group that'll listen to me. People in Little Rock used to joke. They said, you don't want to get around him because all he does is talk about juveniles and gangs and all that, and they got tired of hearing it. They labeled me as hysterical, but the population didn't grow and our homicide rate did grow, and we realized suddenly at the end of '94 that something had better be done about it. So the city changed focus and things have gotten a lot better there.
Steve, in your experience, there are a lot of people around the country who deal with gangs, those of us who are just on the receiving end of whatever information the news media gives us. Why do kids join gangs? Is it money? Is it drugs? Is it what?
Money and drugs are probably the same thing when you think about it, because there's a myth about most street gangs. A lot of people think they're all a bunch of crackheads, but most gangs, if they're really an organized gang, they have strict rules about that. What I found mainly that kids were seeking out of the gangs were they were looking for identity, recognition, belonging, discipline, love, and respect. Those are the big 6 reasons that sociologists and young people have told me that children get involved in gangs. So I began to realize that it would be a very easy thing to do if the communities would provide a place for those children to go and get identity, recognition, belonging, discipline, love, and respect somewhere else. Many communities failed, though, because the leaders were assuming that if they did something like we like to do when we were kids, that the kids of today would gravitate to that. And we found out very quickly that that didn't work. And so many communities have now begun to listen to what the young people are saying. They've included them in the planning process to deal with this issue.
Mm-hmm. How organized, how structured are gangs today?
It depends. There's several different levels. We have gangs across the nation that are very organized, that are more organized than most businesses. Those are what I call pure gangs. But the biggest problem we're facing toward the end of the 90s is what's known as hybrid gangs. I call them teenage mutant gangsters. They have no real connection to the true gangs in the epicenters of Chicago and LA, where they've had gangs for 30 years or so. But these are young people who are seeking an identity. It's popular and trendy and cool to be in a gang. That's kind of changing now, but it's popular and trendy and cool. And I've had kids who have mixed symbols together. In other words, they've had friends who were, say, Crips, and they've had friends who were, say, Bloods, and they mix it all up. And pretty soon, though, you have the same thing. A duck's a duck. It doesn't make any difference if they're organized. If they're doing the same thing, if a duck quacks on this side of the room, it's a duck. If it quacks over here, it's a duck. So we have hybrid gangs in this nation, which are probably the most dangerous right now because they fight constantly to see who's in charge, who's going to be in charge. So there's a lot of intra-gang violence with the hybrid gangs.
Mm-hmm. What are we facing in terms of gangs and gang members nationwide in sheer numbers?
The National Gang Crime Research Center in Chicago recently released a statistic that said, this is pretty scary, but they estimate that there are 2.3 gang members for every police officer in this country. So the gang members outnumber police officers nearly 2.5 to 1. Mm-hmm. We have a serious problem in this country. Now, some people, you know, gangs is kind of the catchword, but there's all kinds of names for these individuals. Gangs, posses, cliques, crews, it doesn't make any difference what they're called. And once again, a duck's a duck.
How does a kid get involved with a gang? What's the typical first encounter with
several ways.
A gang?
You have transplanted gangs that come to a community. You have recruiters that come to a community. There are actually, in Little Rock, we had Crip recruiters that came like crazy. They saw fertile ground of young people with nothing to do. They came there and offered them a place to go and find identity, recognition, belonging, discipline, love, and respect. Another thing that happens, the transplanted gangs, suppose that your sister lives in Chicago and you have a 16-year-old nephew that's getting in a lot of trouble. She calls you up and she says, look, I'm sending Junior down there to live with you for a while. Well, it's easy to take the kid out of the gang, but you also have to figure out why the kid's in the gang and take the gang out of the kid at the same time. If you don't, all you've done is transplant his gang to here, and a lot of times those transplanted gang members are more dangerous because they come from another community. They were low man on the totem pole. They didn't have any rank or any juice in their particular gang, but when they come here, they'll fill the rest of the kids with all of these tales about how I've murdered this guy and done this and did this and all these things, which most of it's not true, but then you have a gang here.
Mm-hmm. Tell us, what's the typical profile of a young man or woman who gets involved in gangs? Are they typically minority, inner city?
That's what everybody thinks. See, and that's one of the problems. We used to think, and probably years ago you could say there was a profile, inner city, poor youth who came from a broken family. But I dealt with a kid whose mother was a lawyer and father was a doctor, and this kid's in the penitentiary now for pulling a gun on a woman at an ATM machine. It's men, it's women, it's boys, girls, it's black, white, any color in between. Everybody's involved in the activities now.
Mm-hmm. Is this a problem experienced only in large cities,
No.
LA, Chicago?
No. Carlsbad, New Mexico, they've got gangs. Hannibal, Missouri, the home of Mark Twain. I spent some time there. They have vice lords and BGDs in Hannibal, Missouri. Small towns, Redfield, Arkansas. I mean, it's not restricted to any particular area now, and it's no reflection on any community if it happens there because it's happening all across the nation.
Mm-hmm. You're watching Dangerous Bonds on Cox Metro 10. When we come back, we're going to be talking with someone who is involved on the front lines of fighting gangs in Shreveport, Louisiana. Roosevelt Seabury will join us. Stay tuned to Dangerous Bonds here on Cox Metro 10.
Special promotional consideration is given to Le Pavillon Hotel, European grandeur in the heart of New Orleans. The Hampton Inn & Suites Elmwood, located in the Elmwood Business Park. And the Rose Garden, a DiMaggio's catering enterprise. The world of communications has changed forever.
And we want you to choose what you want to see, and that's what we're trying to do.
Get aligned with the latest information, technology, and innovations.
In Focus, we are live tonight.
We'll define the industry and determine its direction while keeping you informed.
Our goal is to satisfy you as a customer.
Turn to In Focus with Cox Communications, Thursdays at a new time, 5:30 p.m. with weekly replays. Keeping you informed has never been easier.
At first glance, this seemingly peaceful community appears far removed from the crisis being faced in Los Angeles. A closer look, however, reveals a relatively small city infested with LA-style street gangs.
What you're seeing is an excerpt from Dangerous Bonds, Gangs in Our Communities that Cox Metro 10 is currently airing. Joining us right now is Roosevelt Seabury. He's a part of the Neighborhood Intervention Assistance Programs in Shreveport, Louisiana. Roosevelt, Shreveport is known as the Little L.A. How did gangs get to be so big in Shreveport?
Well, basically, as Steve had mentioned earlier, the gang members came down from Los Angeles and from other places, and it's basically family-oriented, people who grew up there, grandparents who were there, and the children came back home, and they brought their sets. But also, you know, there were also small communities that had their own little cliques.
Mm-hmm. What are you seeing in Shreveport? What kinds of things are gangs into?
Shreveport, since the documentary and some of the things that the Shreveport Police Department has done, has certainly quietened down because of the raid by the federal government. But there are a lot of things that, just like any other community that have gangs, you have your drive-bys, you have the drug dealers, some intimidation, a lot of recruiting within the school systems. There was a situation just recently where a parent called my office because her 16-year-old son was threatened by an 11-year-old gang member. Mm-hmm. Because his 8-year-old niece spit on the boy, so he wanted to kill him. So it's kind of rooted. It's rooted, but somehow we're getting a grip.
Just a few minutes ago, Steve mentioned that there are Crips and Bloods and a variety of others that import into a city. You all had one that wasn't imported, it was homegrown, called the Bottoms Boys. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about them.
The Bottoms Boys lived in a small section of town down in the downtown area of Shreveport. They were a very, very rootless group, very strong, very rooted, respected by a lot of people because they were notorious, but no longer are they as powerful as they've been in the past, and that's good for Shreveport.
Mm-hmm. As you may have seen in the documentary, the federal investigators and local investigators managed to infiltrate the Bottoms Boys by posing as Hollywood directors and producers, saying they wanted to perform a movie about them, and gave them a video camera.
Sure.
And said, just videotape what you do and let us see what you do. They helped incriminate themselves by doing that. What effect did that have on the community, the gang like the Bottoms Boys?
Well, twofold. One, you know, naturally because most of the youth there were homegrown, and people don't always feel comfortable with the federal government or with the police department. They sometimes think that the police department is picking on certain minority communities, so it was kind of mixed reaction. There were others who felt like there are other gangs who were maybe larger, and they wanted to know why that particular set was targeted. But for the most part, overall, the citizens were very, very happy that something was done about that situation. And it certainly caused the other gang members to take notice. Now they've kind of quietened down and moved underground.
You know, Bob, one of the things that communities have to understand is while Sheriff Lee and his very capable crew are doing their job, targeting that bad, and it's only about 8% of children that are bad. Statistically, that's been proven. While they're targeting those leaders and doing the sting operations and the drug buys, and they're going to continue to do that because that's one of the things you have to do in a community. You have to have good, strong, zero-tolerance enforcement. You have to make it clear that these are the rules. You break the rules, this is going to happen to you. Now, while that's going on, there's a tremendous vacuum created. See, while all those leaders are targeted and taken out, there's a tremendous leadership vacuum. And what better way and what better time than right then to move in as a community and recognize that while the police are doing strong suppression and enforcement, then you have to do strong intervention and prevention. That doesn't mean a bunch of new tax-based programs. That means people starting to care about people. You need to address this issue. It's like cancer. I may have said this already, but it's like cancer. You cannot just treat the pain. You have to treat the disease. And that's what the whole community has to do. It's a total concept. Gangs are a community problem. The whole community has to be involved in it. And those communities that just expect and are those communities that are just watching while the police try to do it, it's overwhelming. It'll be overwhelming. You have to dry up the recruit pool. You have to give those kids places and a positive path to take. If you offer them a positive path, they'll take it, even if there's a negative path being offered too.
Steve, in your experience, what is zero tolerance? What have you observed around the country?
Well, it's different in different communities. You know, that's one of the things that I'm finding. And what necessarily works in Jefferson Parish won't work in Shreveport.
Correct.
What works in Shreveport won't work in Little Rock. You have to take into account the locale that you are. But the basics of it are that if you want to beat the gangs, you understand them and compete with them. You provide for the children in the community the things that the gangs and they lie about what they provide for them, but kids are taken in by it.
Sure.
But if the community's providing that elsewhere for them, they'll take that positive path.
The other thing, too, is that gangs members always cause kids to feel like they love them. They really care about them. And one of the things that I've noticed is, and I've said often, that you have to surround a child with their own gang, which I say it's your family. I say it's the pastors. I say it's the school teachers. You know, those recreational directors. You have to say to the gang members that this is one kid we are not going to turn over to you. This is one person who we are concerned about, who we really do love and who we really do care about. And as Steve mentioned, you've got to give them some positive things. And Shreveport Parks and Recreation right now is implanting recreational activities within that area where the Bottom Boys were.
Mm-hmm. What sort of suggestions would you make to people with a burgeoning gang problem? Things they can do besides zero tolerance at that grassroots level, families and community?
The first thing they have to do is recognize it. Gang members use intimidation factors. That's their number one way of recruiting, and they'll threaten a child. They'll say to a child, we're going to kill your mother, we're going to kill your father, or your sister, or your brother, if you don't be a part of our set. So I say that we've got to turn the table. Gang members cannot stand a video camera. If you place a camera on them, they're going to fly like roaches. They're going to hide because they know that now they no longer can do their dirt and hide. So I say turn the camera on them. I say become more open and more focused about dealing with them and having everybody in the community targeting specific gangs, specific sets at a time. If you're trying to take them all down at one time, you're going to have a problem. But if you're determined to wipe them out one by one and you're solely committed to that, and reaching those kids, and at the same time, not just talking about destroying them, but trying to literally reach them. There's some who the gang was their only way out. You know, they messed up in school or they messed up at home, and they don't really know how to come back. They don't really know how to even apply for a job. So I say that we have to look at prevention and intervention two ways. One, we have to do what we can to reach those who are salvageable. At the same time, we have to prevent the kids who may be tempted to look toward that gang as something positive. And at the same time, we've got to put everybody else focus on making sure that the gang members don't win.
Mm-hmm. When we come back here on Dangerous Bonds, we're going to talk to Sheriff Harry Lee and Lieutenant Curtis Snow about what's being done in Jefferson Parish and about, in some quarters, the unpopular stance Sheriff Lee took about recognizing gangs in this parish. We'll be right back with Dangerous Bonds, a forum on gangs.
all-new series of outdoor adventures on Cox Metro 10.
J.D. Power and Associates rank cable TV companies nationwide. One company dominated. Cable TV users ranked it best overall in a study that compared reception quality, programming, value, customer service, and more. Every day this company shows why it ranked best in overall customer satisfaction. The company, Cox Communications, ranked best among cable TV companies in America. Now with the power to back it up, Cox Communications, expect the best.
Los Angeles is renowned.
Yeah.
It's famous for gangs and gang members and everything. But then we come to Jefferson Parish. I mean, that's kind of like the last place in the world, I would imagine, gangbangers. But here we are.
They got
here we
them.
are talking.
They got them.
What are the gangs like in this area?
To me, a lot of them are fake. A lot of them are wannabes, trying to be, but they ain't. You know, like them little kids out of Harvey, they call themselves 211 soldiers. You know, they go ride around and, you know, terrorize some little 14-year-olds or something. When they come across a person like myself who ain't gonna play with they, you know, because they punks, they gonna call the police on me, you know what I'm saying? That's why they phony. Because see, in California, if you're in a gang, somebody comes does something to you, you go back and you do something to them. You don't go calling the police, because, you know, that's not being a gangster, that's being a coward, straight up coward, you know what I'm saying?
And that's Trigger T from Dangerous Bonds, Gangs in Our Community. Joining us right now is the Jefferson Parish Sheriff, Harry Lee, and with him is Commander of the Jefferson Parish Gang Enforcement Section, Lieutenant Curtis Snow. Sheriff Lee, how long ago were you all first discovered gangs in Jefferson Parish?
It's been more than 5 years now since my staff told me, Sheriff, we have an emerging gang problem. We have to do something about it. At that time, I appointed Curtis Snow, and now we have 5 full-time deputies address the gang problem. 3 of them in the gang enforcement group, and 2 in the GREAT program, to show you that this isn't just a local problem. GREAT is Gang Resistance Education. That's a national organization. Now, we have the DARE program in every school in Jefferson Parish. We're in the process of getting the GREAT program in every school in Jefferson Parish, because I think if the kids have an opportunity to know what they're getting into, they may have a chance to look at something else. In addition to what we're doing with the gang resistance, like Steve and Roosevelt said, we have to give them an alternative. I've decided that after 17 years being sheriff, I think we've set an enviable record of catching crooks. But it finally occurred to me last year that we're growing them faster than we can catch them. So what we have to do now is we have to spend more money with the kids before they get in trouble, before they become my customers, before we address them, we're looking at them. Lynn Parker's here. She's very active in the Bissonnet group. I went there one time and some kid came up, and we have a good relationship. Mr. Hawkins is here from the West Bank. They told me years ago, you know, we want to get you involved. We want to do something. We will start in the next few weeks the most aggressive young Marine program in the United States. And what I'm saying aggressive is because the full resources of a big sheriff's office will be behind that program. The judge from the juvenile courts here, all 3 of the judges are enthusiastic about this, because the Young Marine program is another outlet for them to handle kids that come across their desk who appear before them.
It's too late by the time you get involved with gangs, really, isn't it? I mean, you're the final, you know, in zero tolerance.
I was the final.
Well,
yeah, he was the final.
This guy is, I tell you, you don't know how great it is to find somebody who was proactive before proactive was cool. And he's had programs in place, and that's probably why that this parish has done so well, and that's probably why you don't have the homicide rate, is because, and I doubt that anybody knew about a lot of the programs that he was doing, because nobody wanted to talk about them, because nobody thought they were needed. But it's wonderful to find somebody that's had that foresight. And this Marine program he's talking about, remember what I said kids get involved in gangs for? Identity, recognition, belonging, discipline, love, and respect. If you know anybody in here that's ever been in the military, or ever played football, or ever been in a choir, or ever been in a band, those are the same things. So, you know, I have to tell this parish, they're awful lucky. A lot of counties around this country aren't this lucky.
Curtis Snow, what kind of gangs do we have in Jefferson, and how many of them are there?
Well, there's approximately 37 documented gangs in Jefferson Parish at this time. What kind of gangs they are? Hybrid gangs. As Steve was talking about earlier, the mutant gangs are the hybrid gangs. Those are the gangs that have spread out into the suburbs And we are certainly still part of suburbia, and that's the problem that we've attracted out here in concerning gang activity is the hybrid gangs.
What do the gangs do?
From homicide to status offenses, homicide self-explanatory, status offenses, truancy, running away, offenses like that. And a lot of times with the gang members, it'll start with those very minor status offenses. They don't look like much on the surface, but as that child grows, and I'm sure that Judge Jansen is here tonight, she's going to reiterate what I'm saying. As that child grows, those crimes become more severe and more severe. And in the tunnel murder last year on Thanksgiving Day, we had a child that certainly fit that profile. Started out with status offenses, homicide.
There's a whole body of sociology available on gangs, and they talk about gang cohesiveness and how together those gangs are. In your experiences, I'll start with Steve first. Gang cohesiveness, are gangs this super organized group?
Now, when you get them separated, they're not. Right. You know, and they say they're so loyal to one another, but when they get separated, they'll snitch each other off like crazy. And the other thing that these gang members tell you is, we're going to be your family. We love you. We love you. I've gone to visit gang members in the penitentiary, and I've asked them how many of their gang families ever come to visit them in this penitentiary, and they say, well, none of them. And I say, how many of your blood family, your real family, has come to visit you? And they say, well, my father, my mother, my aunt, my grandma. And I say, well, that ought to tell you who your family is. That ought to tell you right there. So that's one of the big myths and the big lies that gangs always tell kids. But if you separate them, and if you get them confused, like I was talking about the vacuum, while the sheriff and the enforcement team are doing the bad guys and taking out the leaders, boy, that's a great time to move in on the rest of them, those on the periphery that are making the decision whether they want to be bad or good.
Curtis, in your work, how important is building up a rapport with gang members from the law enforcement standpoint?
Oh, it's very important. We do intelligence work, and then we have an intelligence division, and they're also very actively involved in gathering the intelligence. I just can't stress the importance of it. The gangs are very fluid. They're not static. They're very fluid, and you have to keep abreast with it on a daily basis, not a weekly. But you skip 3 weeks of gang involvement, and you've skipped a lifetime. You have to stay up with it constantly. It's constantly changing, very fluid.
Sheriff Lee, you took some heat as far as the Harvey Tunnel situation was concerned for your hard line on it. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, that was 3 of the people that were killed in that were documented gang members. I was laughed at. The same thing like Steve said before. You know, they laughed about it and say, "Don't talk to him. All he wants to do is talk about gangs." But if it's a problem, we have to talk about it. And when some of the commercial stations asked me today, said, "What about do this?" The fact that we are here is we recognize there is a problem, and we can't turn our back on it. And Steve, most of me said, "Look," he said, if you don't agree with him saying throw rocks at me," I said, "Man, I'm so glad to hear there's a national expert that agree with what I've been saying for 5 years. All the people around here saying we don't have a gang problem." I said, "Look, you don't have a gang problem? Congratulations. We have a gang problem, and it's not going to go away by not talking about it. Let's talk about it. Let's do some different things." Chief Rodriguez is always looking at things. We come up with something. The murder we had, the 2 murders we had the last couple of, the same thing he said, both of those were ungovernable. So in fact, we had the rap sheets on them. And what they do is, sometime in their early career, their mothers turned them in. The young man that killed his mother the other day, you would not believe that. She was insistent that he join the Young Marines. She heard about that we were going to offer this program. In his confession, he said, "My mama wanted me to join the Young Marines and I didn't want to." And she said, "You have to sign an application by the time I get off work Friday." When he came home, the application wasn't signed. There was this argument, and he killed his mother. And what it was she recognized the fact that she could do with she should do with her son. Maybe let Harry Lee, or maybe the juvenile division, or let somebody else take a shot at it. And that's what we want to do. And I understand it's just the little story that was in Times Pick. You know that we have 200 applicants for the Young Marines, and whatever it costs. And like I'm saying, I'm going to be very aggressive about it, because it doesn't do any good to spend a whole lot of money to catch crooks if we're making them faster than we can catch them. Let's stop making them. Let's catch these kids when they're 12 and 11 and 13 years old, and say, look, you don't have to join a gang. You want a gang? You want to wear distinctive clothing? You know, what's a gang? Distinctive clothing, common goals, common likes. That's the Boy Scouts. Secret signs?
Yeah.
That's the Boy Scouts. Yeah. So when you talk about the classic definition of a gang, and you take the Boy Scouts, that is the classic definition, but it's for healthy purposes. And what my intentions to do with the juvenile court judges and Tim Cool and the Parish administration and my juvenile division. We're going to go all out to say, look, here's an alternative to the gangs. Lynn Parker, on their own, built a volleyball court. We found out there's a lot of juvenile crime between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock when you have 2 working parents. There's that time, that little time scale where the kids aren't in school and they don't have any supervision. They get out and get in trouble. I'm building a rope course for like $10,000 at Bonneville High School. I'm building a basketball court and a volleyball court at Grace King. I built a volleyball court. And someone said, why are you spending so much money in the school system? You should be the sheriff. And I'm saying, yeah, but what I'm doing isn't the answer. So we're going to try something else. And if that doesn't work, we'll try something else.
Roosevelt, you had a comment? I just want to add, you know, for the parents and for those who are concerned about what's really happening with this phenomena, and we have to look at it in the context as they see it. Gang members look at the military as a gang. They look at the police department as a gang. When I graduated from Booker T. Washington here in New Orleans, well, we looked at Corn School and Carver and, you know, some of the other high schools. We had rivals with our high schools, you know. So that's a part of it. But when you really look at it in the proper context, it's not a big thing for us to be able to accept when you consider that the mafia has been around for years, when you consider that the skinheads are still out there, when you consider that we have problems with, you know, with society as a whole. It's not a problem that can't be handled. We just have to put it in the proper context. And even the drive-by shootings is nothing new. Al Capone them did that, you know. So we just got to see it in the proper context. It's something that has happened before, and it's something we can certainly get a grip on, you know. But we just, and you mentioned about the cohesiveness. Sure, the initial gang members started off with their process of having sergeant at arms and a general and so on and so on and so on. But the gangs today, with the mutant gangs, as Steve mentioned, they're not as organized at all. And the only time that they really find loyalty is when it comes that they're all drunk or they're all high and they're going to get someone back, or, you know, a drive-by or a retaliation action. Then they find all their homeboys, they're ready to go down with them and literally die for them. And to them, they're like, hey, my man have my back, he's willing to die for me. Same thing with the girls. They're just as hard as the boys, you know. So, but it is something that can be handled.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, let's, Steve, Roosevelt, Curtis, and Sheriff Lee, let's talk about the girls in gangs, because that's a phenomenon most people don't realize. You're watching Dangerous Bonds, a forum on gangs here on Cox Metro 10. When we come back, we'll take questions from our audience and calls from our viewers.
Hi, I'm Ray Nagin, Vice President and General Manager of Cox Communications. We are very excited about what is down the line for our cable television customers. Cox technicians are currently rebuilding our network with fiber optic cable that will increase picture reliability and quality. This fiber network will open up an array of services such as new channels, telecommunication services, high-speed internet access, and video on demand. Cox Communications, the company you rely upon for entertainment, quality customer service, and community involvement, is bringing you the future today.
Were shot in a car driving through the Harvey Tunnel. All of the victims were members or associates of the 5.9 Bloods, a gang becoming well known for its role in violence on the West Bank.
We was waiting outside the door. The man came and told us to wait. And then he walked inside the emergency room. We was wait there for like 1-2 minutes. He came out and said he was sorry, but she died. And I just lost it. You know, I didn't know what happened.
Of course, that's talking about the Harvey Tunnel incident, which we've talked about a few minutes ago. Girls and gangs. You don't normally think of that. Steve, girls are strong members of gangs?
Yes, some girls merely are hangers-on and followers of the guy gangs, but there are some all-girl sets, and they're just as dangerous and violent as the guys. You know, there's a process. The girls are a little bit different, though, because most of the guys that get in gangs can be jumped in. Some gangs call it clicked in, blessed in, courted in, whatever, but it basically involves being beat down by their own gang members to take it's kind of like a hazing. Girls have the option now, and this is something new that a lot of the original gangsters that I know have told me that never happened before. Girls can be sexed into a gang where they are required to have a certain type of sexual ritual to get in a gang. We had a gang in Arkansas called it being diced in. They rolled a set of dice, whatever number came up on the dice, that was the number of guys the girls had to have sex with to get in the gang. And they were doing it willingly. And then after they did that, they would get branded. And I mean, it's just unbelievable that young people will do these kind of things to belong to something. And that's why I say society's got to recognize, they got to give those kids something somewhere else, and recognize that most of the young people that get in these gangs come from what I call the 5H club. Helpless, hopeless, homeless, hungry, and hugless. And if you provide those 5 H's for them somewhere else, and everybody says it's the family should be doing that, but unfortunately we've got families that cannot do that. We have children who are having children in our society today. And whose fault is it? Who cares? Let's just fix the problem.
On the phone line we have a former gang member, he says, named Chad. Hi, Chad.
How you doing?
What's your comment?
Oh, well, I'm an ex-gang member back in the 90s, and I was a football player at John Ehret High School. And I just wanted to say that a big part of my life dealing with that was back in '88 when they come out with the movie called Colors.
Yep.
That's where I learned about gangs, and that's when me and between 75 and 100 of my friends strong formed a gang. And it just eventually just faded out, but that music is just really, you know, it's just really becoming a big part of the gangs. And if you look back in between 87 until 96, you'll see increases in the crime rate, and you'll also see with music, because I buy all the CDs, I got all the tapes, records from when music first started up until now. And I just want to say, I feel that music plays a big part about all these kids that are getting arrested and in gangs. Go look at their CDs and their tape box and look and see what type of music they're listening to.
Yeah, and if you want to understand what they're saying, you have to listen to it too.
Curtis, your experience, movies, music play a role?
I definitely think movies and music influence. It's not just one factor. It's a multitude of factors that go into making up the end product, but certainly those are two of them. They are influential. I've had several people in the last couple of years want to argue that point, that music is not influential, that the movies are not, that the gang rap is not influential, the movies, etc. However, if people could not be influenced like that, then my question back to them is, why is the advertising business a billion-dollar business every year? Of course people can be influenced. Of course they can.
It's not only the movies, though. It's not only the movies and the music. Young people watch the news. They read the newspaper. They see how we adults are resolving our conflicts with each other. They see how these sports heroes that are making millions of dollars a year spit in umpires' faces and kick cameramen and stuff, and they get away with it. So it's not just the media. I mean, it's not just the fictional media, the movies and the music. It's everything. It's our society. It's kind of, they're bombarded by these images that say if you have a conflict, the way you resolve the conflict is you pick up an arm. And we had 111 homicides, I told you, in Little Rock in 1993. 91 of those were with guns. Every 24 hours in this country, every 24 hours, 10 children died by gunfire injuries. 10 children. So how are we going to get kids to quit killing each other with guns? Well, the movies influence them to do that many times. I've interviewed kids that said, yeah, I did that drive-by because I watched a movie and I wanted to see if I got the same amount of power. But we have to start working at a very young age with children, K through 3, teaching them about conflict resolution. Let them mediate the conflicts. Teach them about that at a young age. They carry that from school to home. We can't get rid of all the guns. That's never going to happen. I'm a realist about that. But we can teach kids at a very early age that it's not like in the movies. You know, in the movies, when Ice-T and Ice Cube and all those guys get shot up, they get up and go cash a paycheck. But on the streets, it's not like that. And many kids I found didn't realize about the finality of death.
Roosevelt, you have any experience with that?
One of the things that you have to understand about the phenomenon, the way it is right now, is that it's not just 11-year-old, 8-year-olds, 13, 16-year-old gang members. They're gang members anywhere from 35 to 40 years old, 4, 5, 6 generations deep. You know, so you're doing everything you can on one hand to try to reach them, to tell them what's right, to try to show them an alternative, but they have to go home,
right,
you know, around uncle or aunt, you know, or mom. You know, I was looking even at the video of the lady who lost her son. You know, if you know, and I tell parents all the time, if you know that a certain outfit or certain colors in certain areas is going to cause your child to either be harassed or there's an opportunity of him getting killed, then don't let him wear it. You know, take it from him. Don't do it. Don't put him out there. Don't put yourself in a position of possibly being killed because somebody think you're a gang member. You know, you heard Steve say if it looks like a duck, you know, if it quacks, what you going to call it? You're going to call it a duck. And the way these kids are dressing, especially now, you know, they may not even want to be associated with a gang, so they say. But the way they dress and the way they look, they can't walk down the street. Because somebody's going to check.
They are.
Well, I'd like to add, in Jefferson Parish, that's why we carry our intervention and prevention programs from small children all the way through high school and into adulthood, because we're very much aware that a 5-year-old child and a 15-year-old juvenile, there are tremendous, and every parent knows that. We don't really have to prove that to anybody. There's tremendous differences while you're growing up, and we know that. So our intervention and prevention officers, mainly our grade officers, take care of that problem. And so we work very strongly in those areas to cover the entire spectrum of ages that would attract gang activity.
Right next to me, we have one of the grade officers here. If you wouldn't mind rising, what sort of intervention does the GREAT program get involved with?
The GREAT program offers, like Steve and Curtis and the rest were saying, alternatives to gang life. We strongly stress that you don't have to do all the negative behaviors. You can follow a positive path. We give them the choice. This is the right way, this is the wrong way. The gangs are offering the wrong way. What choice do you want to do? Do you want to mess up your life, or do you want to be successful? And most of them, as myself and Sergeant Meyer, the other grade officers say, they will oftentimes not go with what's best for them. They don't want to mess up their life. And I'll have to agree with what Steve said. They will take the path of positive choices if given the choice.
Thank you, Deputy Hippler. Steve, how important is work? Before I get to that, Curtis, what age range are we looking at in gangs in Jefferson Parish?
From 10 to 25.
How important is work for the older kids, the 17, 18, 19-year-olds?
It's not only important for the older kids, it's important for the younger kids. I think that's one of the things we've done in this country. We have all these child labor laws and all that, but I would much rather have a child working in a controlled environment somewhere than working for a gang member on the street corner. I knew a young kid in Little Rock who was 6 years old who his sole job was lookout. And the way I met him was he was riding a brand new bike in this neighborhood, and he had a cellular phone. It was before these little bitty ones came out, while they were still real expensive. He had one of these little bitty ones in his pocket. And I got to talking with him, and he told me that he made $50 a day for 3 hours of work, and all he had to do was punch in a code on the cellular phone that warned them that somebody was in the neighborhood that shouldn't be there. He was making $50 a day. I asked him what he did with that money. He told me he took it home and gave it to his mother. He sheepishly told me that he skimmed $5 of it off for himself, but he gave the rest of it to his mother. I said, what does she do with the money? He said, she pays the rent, she buys food for us, you know, just the thing. He'd become basically the breadwinner in the family. So jobs, there's an important linkage between that. PBS did a wonderful documentary called Jobs: A Way Out, and they showed how if you take it, if I had my druthers, if I had a group of gang members that were trying to straighten themselves out, I'll tell you, you can't find a bunch of harder workers and more loyal people, if you know, and they will work like crazy if they see light at the end of the tunnel.
We have a phone call. Let's talk to, and the name is Nathan. Hi, Nathan. You're on Dangerous Bonds.
How you doing?
All right.
I'd like to say that everybody's talking about a gang problem, but I think it's more of a race problem.
Steve?
I think that since these minorities have invaded formerly safe white neighborhoods and schools, they've turned them into war zones. And you can see that the influx of non-white minorities in the past 5 years has coincided with the rise in crime.
Gentlemen, you want to go ahead? Who wants to be
Well,
first?
I'll take that first in Jefferson Parish. That's not true. That's simply just not true. The gangs in our communities are comprised of all races of people. All races.
That's what I'm finding across the country, too. So.
You couldn't pinpoint one race and say, oh, they're responsible. It's impossible.
Right.
Absolutely impossible.
And I would certainly say that I wouldn't disagree with the caller and say that there isn't a racial problem in America. We still have some things that we have to deal with and some things we have to iron out. But it's more class issue to me. You know, it's more educational issues to me. It's more parental issues to me. Even the churches have to get more involved. I think that there are a lot of reasons why people are in gangs, but I certainly don't feel like there's one particular thing like race in particular.
And most of the time, you know, most gang violence is directed at other gang members. I mean, it's not, especially if it's an organized gang. Now, some people, you hear the word wannabes. I dislike that word because it's a disarming word. I call them gonnabes. The wannabe, the hybrid gangs, the mutant gangs, they're really more dangerous than the pure gangs who have strict leadership and control. But when you have these hybrids who know that people think of them as wannabes, or on the street they're known as busters or perpetrators, well, they have to be meaner. You know, they have to be meaner. And I can tell you, traveling across the country, this is not a problem that is the African Americans going into the white community. It's happening everywhere. It is having a profound effect on the African American race in this country, because since 1988, the Centers for Disease Control has tracked the homicide rate for young men who are of African American heritage under 24 as an epidemic. The very same people that track AIDS and Ebola and all these other horrible viruses track the homicide rate for young black men as an epidemic. And almost every young black man that's killed is killed by another young black man. So, you know, it can be, you can say it's a race problem in that sense, that a whole race is wiping itself out. But it's not a racial issue that the blacks have moved into the white neighborhoods and created all this problem. I mean, I think that's a racist attitude.
Right, because I can assure you that if that occurred, if black folks were moving in and killing white folks all over the place, there would be something major happening to do something about it. And so I don't think that's the problem.
Sheriff Lee, any comment?
Oh, about the race issue?
Yeah.
I don't think it is definitely not a racial issue, as Curtis knows, and he comes in contact with people on a daily basis, and it's not an educational, an economic issue. We have, as Steve pointed out, some very wealthy people from the finest schools in New Orleans and Jefferson Parish. We're very surprised that are in the gangs, and I guess they do it for the same thing. Whatever they think they can get from the gang, they're not getting at home, and they're not getting somewhere else. And I think my responsibility and the judge's responsibility, and those of us who have something to say about it, has to give them an alternative. And we will look, and we will look under this rock, and we'll look behind that corner until we find out something. In Lynn Proctor's thing in Bisonnet Plaza, I go sit with those kids and say, look, I'm 64 years old. I don't know what interests you. How can I tell you what you want to do this weekend? You tell me what you want to do. You tell me where you want to go. I'll provide the bus, and I'll provide the tools. I'll provide everything else. Let's do something. Let's do something that's fun for everybody. And I said, I don't care what it is. You tell me what you want to do, we'll do it. I can't tell a 15-year-old kid that this is what you want to do this weekend. So what he's saying, we're listening. You tell us what you want to do. And we're going to go throughout the whole parish. You tell us what you want to do, you tell us what you want, and we'll help you.
Sheriff Lee, thank you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll get questions and comments from the members of our audience. You're watching Dangerous Bonds, a forum on gangs, here on Cox Metro 10.
Special promotional consideration is given to Le Pavillon Hotel, European grandeur in the heart of New Orleans. The Hampton Inn & Suites Elmwood, located in the Elmwood Business Park. And the Rose Garden, a DiMaggio's catering enterprise.
Getting to is getting what's new. New sports, new ideas, a new generation of viewers with impressive net worth, who drive the economy, who stay tuned, think big, and motor trends. They transform today's phenomena into tomorrow's mainstream. ESPN2 is the #1 new network. ESPN2, reach into the future.
Call now. Get Star Pack's 3 exciting channels for only $2.95 per month.
So like, they got a neighborhood that all Bloods go into, and they got a group of neighborhood of all Crips, and they got a group of neighborhood of all Latin Kings. You just gotta know what neighborhood to put you into and everything. Like if you grow up in a Latin King neighborhood, you're gonna eventually become a Latin King. If you grow up in a Blood neighborhood, you're eventually gonna be a Blood. If you're gonna grow up in a Crip neighborhood, you'll be a Crip.
Start wondering, start paying a little more attention to what's going on, and you start getting real angry, start getting violent, you know, start breaking things, and then we start hearing stuff get missing, you know, and then that idea he was on doing some kind of dope and all because he was acting real strange.
We're back on Dangerous Bonds. Sheriff Lee has mentioned a number of times a lady by the name of Lynn Parker. Here she is. Lynn, your comments.
Well, I think that forums like we're having here tonight are really critical. We've been involved in trying to do some juvenile crime prevention in our neighborhood for a couple of years, and I think it begins, if we can only begin early. Parents need to love their kids early, pay attention and spend time early. And then when the parents and the families really can't provide, I think it is up to the neighborhoods to try to create some activities for the kids. The things that we're doing in our neighborhood are very simple. We're having a lot of fun, and I think it is making a difference. We've not seen the juvenile mischief that I call it. We don't have real gangs, just emerging juvenile baby little infant gangs at this point in my neighborhood. But even the juvenile mischief has really dropped off. I've got a bunch of kids with us here tonight that have been involved in our programs. We do play volleyball with them. The parish provided that. The gang unit and the sheriff have done a bunch of special events with them. And we even have things called Teen Talk Night where the kids just come and talk. And I had no clue that kids would come and talk to adults, but they do. They're very hungry for the attention, the recognition. They can come and belong to their own neighborhood group that's a positive thing. And I think it's urgent that the rest of the community get involved. I agree. I don't think it's something that the government or the sheriffs can do alone.
Lynn, thank you. During the break, Roosevelt mentioned to me that one of the things you all are doing in Shreveport is getting rid of the graffiti.
Correct. You have to get rid of the gang graffiti. That's their marking. That causes them to feel ownership. They feel like they belong and they own that turf. When they're marking up the cities and the walls, you have to take it down as soon as possible. I had 7 high school students from the Shreveport area, different high schools, along with the courts gave me some kids to do community service work. And we took out all of the gang graffiti out of Shreveport. And it stayed down for a long period of time. And I'm saying that if you really want to make an impact, when you begin to take down the graffiti, gang members themselves are going to see things differently because they no longer feel like they have a place. And I say when you see it on the wall, you have to take it down.
Thanks, Roosevelt. And that's something I've heard from law enforcement people more often than not. The graffiti is how they communicate, it's how they disrespect other gangs, and quite often the police can look at the wall and if it's fresh enough, be able to tell if there's going to be a problem coming up. But before we get to your question, we have Dr. Deborah DePreto. She's Director of Forensic Services for Jefferson Parish Human Services Authority. Dr. DePreto, you've been listening for the last 55 minutes or so. What's going through your mind right now?
Well, what's primarily in my mind is that we do need to get more active in preventing kids to get in gangs, because once they're already in a gang, you know, that's a hard battle to fight to get them out. But I agree with Sheriff Lee, the people on the panel, and to try to prevent that. One of the biggest times that kids go into gangs is middle school, when they're like 11, 12, 13 years old. Also, what drives kids to go into schools, into gangs, are what risk factors they may have, such as problems in school, failing in school, they don't want to go to school. Their parents aren't monitoring them, there's not good supervision in the home. Some parents don't even know who their kids' friends are. And so if you help parents with those things or build in other people and things in the community, it really prevents kids from getting involved. In fact, I was reading a book last night, it was real interesting, that teenagers want to be in groups. They like to be affiliated with groups, fraternities, sororities, military, whatever. They like colors, they like structure, they like rules, and they would be just as accepting of a pro-social peer group as a negative peer group, and that's what we need to provide more of, more pro-social peer groups.
Mm-hmm. Curtis, what are the signs parents should look for that their child's involved in a gang?
Well, there's a lot of talk about that, and I've got to tell you, I'm always leery about answering that question, because a lot of the signs of gang involvement are things that children will go through adolescence. My best answer for that question is contact somebody who is trained in gangs. And that can be, certainly start with your school. Your schools have counselors. We work closely with the schools. They're trained in it. Call us. We have plenty of officers that are trained in it, and we make an assessment of the situation. We've had kids claim they were gang members just to hurt their parents. They were no more gang members than a man in the moon, but they would say that to get back at their parents. I mean, that's the extreme case, but it did happen. So we advise, let us make the evaluation, the assessment, and then once that's made, we'll direct them on how to get the proper help.
My name is, excuse me, Billy Sanders with the Woodmere Civic Association. I'm glad to see this forum that we have here to let our residents know what's going on with our children. We've, in our community, we have 16,000 residents and over 4,100 homes. We're a large subdivision on the West Bank. And we've gotten with Sheriff Lee, the Parish Council, and Council District members to try to start, which is a Woodmere playground and sub-district station, to where, like everyone said, we need an outlet, intervention, prevention for our kids. We have a number of gangs in our community. They're back there. You know, I don't care to give them the recognition, you know, but there is that problem there. And what we have to do is reach the kids through the churches. That would be a big way to do it. Through the playground system, like it was mentioned here. But also the parents. In this forum here, I'd like to put out a plea to the parents. Please come to the meetings, learn what your kids are doing. Go to the PTA meetings, come to the Civic Association meetings. We want to give you all this information. Bring your kids with you. We want them to listen to also. You know, they're our future. Guys, girls, you know, you're what makes America strong, and you're our next generation.
Thank you very much. A few seconds left. Steve, any parting comments? We've just got about 30 seconds left.
I went to a conference one time, and one of the things that we got to do was interview a convicted pedophile. He'd killed a 6- and a 7-year-old little boy in some type of worship to Satan, he said. The police officer was there. One of the police officers asked this guy, he said, let's forget the fact that you say you're a Satanist and I'm a cop. How can I keep my kids away from people like you? He looked him right square in the eye and he said, you better go home and you better hug your kid. And you better be there for your kid when they need you, because if you're not there for them, he held out his hands like this. He said, they'll find somebody that is, and he got a big grin on his face, and he said, that somebody's me. That's what every parent ought to listen to. Hug their kids.
Steve Nawojczyk, Sheriff Harry Lee, Curtis Snow, Dr. DePreto, thank you all. Thanks to everyone here in the audience for being with us, and thank you. I'm Bob Pavlovich.